Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Case Interview Podcast. And today it's a Q&A episode. We're going to talk about best source to find drills, how much you should be obsessed about that one case that was hard and you didn't know what to do. We're going to talk about mixing conceptual frameworks with issue trees. And we're going to talk about partner level cases, where to find rules, how to practice those. So these are all of the questions, not some of the questions that we're going to discuss in this episode. And let's do it, Julio.
Let's do it. I'm excited for the partner cases part. Everyone's scared of it and, no one knows anything about them.
Yeah, that's true. And not a lot of people talk about them either in prep resources. But first, I want to start with a different question because this one caught my attention.
Okay.
So this guy, Sean, sent us an email the other day, and it was like huge question, 3 paragraphs long. So it was quite confusing. But the essence of it was, for how long should he be obsessed about this one case? And I'm going to give you some context so we can answer this. So he got a super complex case in a real interview, and he barely understood anything. So it was a specific industry that he didn't know about. It wasn't like mining, airlines, things that we know about. He didn't share what industry it was, but he said it was like very niche.
Okay.
Also, it had unusually hard math concepts. So he also didn't share the details. So that's why this question was a bit confusing.
Okay.
But I don't know. I'm assuming stuff that's not multiplication percentages.
Yeah.
Probably like logarithms, I don't know.
I can imagine a case in an industry that I don't understand anything about, maybe advertising. I don't know much about advertising, for example. And then
and then you have a cohort analysis, so it's kind of tricky mathematically.
Yeah, exactly.
He was also he's also tight on time in his preparation. So he got this case, he has other interviews coming up, but he's tight on time and trying to improve specifically his analytical skills. That's his main concern.
Okay.
And he wants to know if he should spend a lot of time trying to grasp the concepts of this interview that went wrong, or just move on and do regular practice.
All right. So this is quite in my backyard because I remember this question. I remember this guy asking me this specific question because he was also a student in Analytics Academy.
Okay.
So here's the thing. I get that it's super frustrating to be trying to improve your analytical skills, but then you get a case and you don't understand the math. And it's scary because what if you get, that's a real case. So what if you get that in your interview?
Yeah.
So you should really fix that so that you don't have that blind spot.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. If you have limited time, you should not spend more than a couple of hours trying to understand that one specific problem. Here's why. So you have a problem in analytics, and now you know that you also don't understand a specific pair of industry and math problem.
Yeah.
Right? The chances that that specific concept that you're not grasping appear in your interview is super small. But the chances that that skill that you're trying to improve, that analytical skills will appear, is super high. So if you spend a lot of time trying to grasp the concept, eventually you might, but you're going to have spent a lot of time in a concept that probably won't appear instead of spending that a lot of time improving your analytical skills where you know you have a problem that you know will appear. So what you should really do, taking into account that it's super frustrating not to understand a problem, you should spend 2 hours trying to grasp the concept, because if you do, it's a good thing, and you're training your mind to understand a new problem, which is a good thing. But then once those couple of hours are gone, you haven't understood the problem yet, you move on. You do new cases, you try to improve your structuring skills with other cases, and if you want, you can come back to that case for 20 minutes the next day and then see if you can understand, because the back burner of your mind works really well. So if you let that question sit in the back burner, when you come back the next day, you might just understand and see it in a different way. And you can do that for 3-4 days in a row. Eventually it'll come to you, but eventually you're going to need to let go as well.
Yeah.
Like eventually you really need to focus on your math structuring skills in other problems that are more likely to appear rather than that one specific concept. Especially because simple problems repeat a lot and appear a lot. The really complex ones are kind of one in a lifetime. So you really need to practice in them, but not for the concept itself, but for the applying of structuring skills to hard problems.
Right, the mental flexibility to deal with novel problems.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I think, so what I get from this question, there aren't many details, so I'll have to make some assumptions. But let's say that this was a 1 in 500 or 1 in 1,000 case. In terms of, it was very different, very specific, had things that don't appear often. And let's say Sean has, I don't know, 20 more interviews in his case interview career. Like he's going to interview at 5 different firms and he has 20 interviews expected, right? Chances are he's not going to get the same industry. He's not going to get the same type of math problem because these were unusual. So I agree that it doesn't really matter and it's better to move on. Now, I see 2 different scenarios and I don't have the details to judge, but one scenario is this was indeed a really specific industry where regular business sense doesn't apply. And there isn't much to it. Like either you know about the industry or you don't. Yeah. Also, in this same scenario, this was a very specific math problem that you need to know, I don't know, some odd, obscure math concepts to be able to solve. Again, in that case, just let it go. But this also means that this case was poorly designed by the interviewer, which might as well be. Like a lot of interviewers don't put much thought into the case, or they just get something from the last project without thinking if it's gonna evaluate more broad, general problem-solving skills, which is the ideal. Yeah. So if Sean thinks this is the case, the interviewer designed the case poorly to test for general problem-solving skills. And these were actual specificities. So we'll call this a platypus, right? Yeah. You can understand mammals and birds, and you don't really understand a platypus. Yeah. If it was a platypus, then he can just let it go. Because chances of getting another platypus of the same kind is like tiny. Yeah. But there's another scenario. And in this scenario, these questions were actually fair game. And actually, it was a brilliantly designed case in the sense that if you just focus on the traditional problems and traditional frameworks and traditional industries and, you know, the by-the-book math problems, then you can't solve it. Yeah. But if you have a little bit of problem-solving flexibility, both in math as well as in understanding the drivers of an industry you've never heard of, then you can solve it. Yeah. And I've seen cases like this. And in this scenario, I'd say that Sean's issue is a bit deeper. It's not that he should have known about the industry or he should have known about this math problem. It is that he should be more flexible in his approach. So if I get a new industry, like, I don't know, renting equipment to hair salons, I've never heard of this, but I can infer a lot of things about this industry by using both structuring techniques as well as some business sense combined. I can understand a bit of that industry, even though I've never heard of it. And same for math, right? Sometimes you get a weird math concept, but if you structure it in a diligent way and ask intelligent questions about the nature of the problem, then you can find a solution for that. Yeah. And if that's the issue, then I'd say not that Sean should work on that specific case, but that he should work on his problem-solving flexibility.
I think that makes sense. This also made me think of another skill that could be what the case is really testing, both in the industry part and on the math part. And that is asking the right questions. So maybe it's an industry that Sean doesn't understand and that it's designed so that you don't understand. So you have to ask the right questions to understand the dynamics of the industry. And maybe it's a complex math problem, but that requires you to ask the interviewer things like, I have this specific issue. How do you want me to solve this? Like, how do you want me to account for risk in this specific situation? How do you want me to account for losses, given that we don't know anything about it?
Yeah,
for example.
I once got a case, I've never shared this before, but I got a case.
Secrets.
I've got a case at McKinsey. It was like 10 years ago, so you're probably not going to get it if you're watching. But it was the math part of the case was a scheduling problem. So there was no equation. So it was a school system, and you had to schedule the classes to maximize the utilization of the teachers, something like that, or minimize the cost or something. And in the real world, the way you solve this is it's an optimization problem with constraints. So you have to use a minimax algorithm or solver, as most people know it in Excel. And you can't do a solver or a minimax in an interview, right? It's a complex math curve. But obviously they didn't expect me to do it because you can't do it, right?
Yeah.
So, but also there's no equation to solve it. You can't build an equation. So what do? You try inputs, see what happens with the outputs, and then you have to iterate a few times until you get to, I don't know if there is a right answer to be gotten at an interview like this, but you get to a very good answer. Yeah. So very close to the optimum. And that's what I did. And there was no way I could have prepared for that. But sometimes you're just too obsessed with the specific techniques and specific types of problems and specific frameworks and
ways
like
to
that.
solve them, right?
Yeah, that you can't see a problem that's a little bit different and recognize like, oh, everything that I learned doesn't really apply here. So I have to think of a different way. Yeah. And obviously, you can't prepare for all of those. That's the point, right? But the thing is, the idea is that you prepare for many different problems so that you cover the main ones, and also you get exposure to a variety of different ones that don't apply, so that if the time comes and you need to get one of these weird ones in an interview, you have a mental habit and also a mental confidence to recognize those as different and just try something, right? Yeah. And even tell the interviewer, like, hey, this is a really different problem. Like, I've never seen something like this, so let's try it out. Yeah. Because the interviewer knows it's different, right? They know it's not what candidates are preparing for. They're doing that on purpose.
Of course.
Yeah. So that's my take.
All right. Great. Thank you. Let's move on to the question that I have for you. I actually have it printed out here. So this is a question from Dylan. Dylan is really looking for drills. They've heard everything we've talked about in other episodes of this podcast, and they want to do solo practice. So here's Dylan's question specifically. I'm prepping for case interviews, and I've been listening to your podcast / reading your articles, which has helped me improve immensely so far. You guys often mention drilling as a good way to improve on specific topics. Drilling is basically doing a part of the case by yourself, to those who don't know it.
A brainstorming, an estimation, just a framework, not the whole case.
Exactly. Now his question is, where can I find these types of drills or example exercises that I can use to practice with?
Okay, good question. And very relevant because I guess no. My thinking is that most people should spend 70 to 80% of their practice time with drills and 20 to 30 with mock interviews because drills are more efficient. Yeah. And there's a sequence to that. You can watch our episode on case prep in just 2 weeks to get an idea of what the sequence should look like. So it's more mock interviews in the beginning, more drills towards the middle and so on. And even if you're not practicing in just 2 weeks, that episode's going to give you a good outline for the sequence, right? Then the time can expand, but but that's the idea. So very relevant question. So what are we looking for when we look for a drill? I'd say we're looking for mainly three things. We're looking for a source of drills that have variety.
Yeah.
So you get exposure to different kinds of problems, different industries, different concepts, different types of structures or types of math problems and so on. So you get a lot of variety. So because if you only practice like frameworks for market sizing and M&A, you're not really preparing yourself for other types of cases, and then you're not going to do well at them, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is you're looking for good answers or good templates for answers. And what that means that you have the question of the drill, and you're also looking for a drill that doesn't have only the question, it also has an example answer, and ideally one that has an explanation of why the answer is like that, and also what could be varied, because your answers 99.9% of the time not going to be the same exact answer as the drill.
Yeah.
But you still need to know if your answer was good or not.
Yeah.
And why, right? So that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a drill that has a good answer. And the third thing is you're looking for a source that is organized or structured in a certain way. So, because if I want to do estimation drills, for example, I want several of them, right? It doesn't help me to find a source that has 2 drills with excellent variety and good answers. Like, it's not going to last long, right? So resource number 1 that I'd recommend is our free course, right? Case interview fundamentals. There are the 6 types of questions there, 1 for each module. You have theory videos, or usually 1, but sometimes depending on the module, a couple theory videos to teach you the technique to solve that specific type of problem. So an estimation, a brainstorming, a hypothesis testing question. And within those theory videos, there are examples, and you can pause the video and try it, and that's a drill, right?
Yeah.
And also there are video drills in the course. So 2, 3, 4 for each type. So it's not a lot, but it's an excellent source. It doesn't really cover the third criterion, right? But it covers the first 2, which is helpful because first, it gets you started. It's free. And also, it gives you a benchmark of the type of drill that you're looking for in terms of variety, quality of answer, even difficulty, because I see a lot of drills online, and that might be a 4th criterion. I see a lot of drills online that are like 10 times easier than what you get in a real interview, and that biases your mind to be less prepared than you should, right?
Yeah.
So that's number 1 resource. If you haven't joined the free course yet, or if you haven't done it, that's one source that's very good.
Which you can find in craftingcases.com/course.
Yeah, exactly.
Just one quick note on that.
Yeah.
I think that the free course is especially good for beginners because of all the criteria that you mentioned, the most important for beginners, in my opinion, is an explained answer. So that the beginner will understand not only, what the right answer is, but also how you would present it to an interviewer and what's the thought process behind getting to that answer so that they can start reproducing it instead of just trying to copy that same answer from one case to another and changing a few words. And that's not something you're going to find really almost anywhere other than our courses, because we work hard to create those specifically because no one in the market is making them.
Yeah, it's our uniqueness. It's what we identified that was lacking, right?
Yeah. But then once you're through with that, once you really understand what the thought process is like, then it's okay to move on to drills that have less depth in the answers, because now you can judge how to get to the thought process. You can even judge some of the answers that the casebooks will give you, because sometimes they won't be good. Actually, oftentimes they won't be good, at least in presentation form.
Yeah.
So that's a good place to start because it has the most important criteria for beginners. the high quality answers, and the details on how to get to it, the thought process.
Yeah, and it's also easy. Like you can start right now.
Yeah, of course.
Right? Now, one thing that doing the free course will help you is identify your weakness, because maybe you want to do drills for all types of skills. If you're focusing your practice on solo practice, you don't know many people, you have to, I don't know, prepare at 11 p.m. or something. But the free course is going to help you identify your weaknesses. And then once you know the weaknesses, there's a second source, which is our paid courses. And I don't know your budget, right? I don't know if you can afford them, if you want to pay for them. But if you do, we have specific courses for specific weaknesses. So we have a course for structuring, which covers frameworks, brainstorming, and hypothesis testing. We have a course for analytics, which covers case math or analysis questions and charts. And we have a course for estimations. And they're all packed with high quality drills, same types of drills you'll find in the free course, but a lot more of them, which gives you also more variety. And also we can go deeper into some more nuanced or less common things that happen.
Okay.
So that's it's probably the best resource for solo practice there is. And you can deep dive into the specific skills. Now, if you don't want to do that,
let's say that they don't like your voice, they've done all of our courses, or they hate us, where else
they
can they
don't
go?
like my accent. Or they don't want to pay. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's another path, which are what I call text-based drills. So these are most of the drills you find online. It's getting a case book and just selecting the specific type of question you want to do drills for and not do the rest of the case. There are some platforms that you can do like hundreds of math exercises and so on. Now, this is fine for volume of practice. But remember our criteria. Their answers are not very good. If you get a case book, for example, it doesn't show you an answer. And other sources, or it shows you an answer, but it doesn't show you the process to get to the answer. And other sources as well, like they show you a template of the answer, but you don't know how good it is, or you don't know like if your answer is different. Is it similar enough? Or let's say it's wildly different. Is it still good? Maybe is it better? And you can't know that.
Yeah.
And the other problem with that is if you're learning that skill, if you're just getting practice for volume, and you can get around this answer quality problem, that's fine. But if it's a weakness and you need to learn that skill and you're practicing to learn, these sources, they're very low on context. So they don't show you why you should say certain things on the answer, or why you should, like, what if you thought this other way? Is this still good?
Yeah.
So it's a path, but it's gonna give you volume. So, but it's kind of like training, right? Either weight training or sports training. If you're doing it right, volume helps a lot. If you're doing it wrong, or if you don't know if you're doing it right, if you may have blind spots, then there's that saying, practice makes perfect, right? But we have a different interpretation of it, which is practice makes permanent.
Right.
Right? The more you practice, the more you solidify what you already do. And if you're doing it wrong, either because you don't know how to do it well, or because you have blind spots, then this type of high volume practice without a lot of learning or context involved is gonna hurt you.
Yeah. I have a different point, but I think that's also a con or something to watch out if you're going for the high volume path. That's something that I saw a lot when I was researching for Analytics Academy, because I had to look at all possible analysis cases that exist. Yeah. And what I see is that there's a lot of repetitiveness. Most cases are repetitive.
Online drills.
Online high volume practice drills.
Yeah.
And if you're going through that route, you really have to watch out for variety and look for different stuff. So if you keep doing casebook drills, you're going to think that the possibilities of a real interview are a lot more narrow than they really are.
Mm-hmm.
And a test that you can do, an interesting test, is at some point go ask people for their cases, the cases they got in McKinsey, for example. You're going to find something widely different. And that's because consulting firms are always going out of the common sense to get cases that are a little bit different so that they can actually find people who know how to think and not people who have memorized enough.
Yeah. You just brought one potential source, which is the consulting firm's website. So some consulting firms, they have cases in their websites for you to solve, and they're kind of formatted like drills. Like you can see each question, each section of the case as a drill. I like those for beginners because they show the variety, they show the breadth through which consulting firms evaluate candidates. So if you go into McKinsey's websites, for example, you're not going to see a lot of market entry cases. You're going to see the types of cases that they actually do, which are very different. The problem with those, and I recommend people do them, but not just do that, because the problem with those is that in a way they're marketing materials for these firms, right?
Yeah.
So the answers that they give are not designed to teach. They're, and I don't know, a lot of people may hate me for this, but I'm gonna say it. They're not good answers. They're incomplete, and a lot of them wouldn't pass a real interview with a real interviewer judging that. And you may think like, oh, it's kind of weird, right? Because a real consultant designed that. And I'm not saying it's a very bad answer that's always gonna fail, but it's not on par with some of the most rigorous interviewers. And they don't want to make the answer too hard on their website, because the target market for that website, the target viewer for that drill is a beginner.
Yeah.
And they don't want to scare people off, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like those videos on YouTube from consulting firms. Bain has one that has like 1 million views or something. Like that interview is not real. And people don't realize that. So
yeah, I wanna put a caveat on that. I think that the cases that you can find in McKinsey and BCG website, they resemble a real case, so you can get an understanding of what a case is like and the level of nuance that you find in a case.
agree.
They're nerfed down, so it's like you're trying to understand a mouse by looking at a Disney Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
So there's that. They're a bit nerfed down, but you do understand what it sort of looks like. The ones in the Bain website, with all due respect, they're very, very simplified, in even to a misleading point. So I would steer away from that.
That's it. I didn't have the nuance of the difference between the websites.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting.
So that's it.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next question.
All right. Next question. It's a question from Christopher.
Okay. What does Christopher want to know?
So he says, thanks for making the course free. I thought it provided me with a great toolbox to structure my preparation process for case interviews.
Thank you, Christopher.
I have a McKinsey final round coming up, and I feel as though I could use more practice with real partner interviews to improve my fluency and explaining the various answers to questions. Are there any books you recommend that have a good mix of case questions designed for use in partner tests? So I guess it means partner interviews, right?
Okay, yeah.
Final round partner interviews, yeah.
Yeah.
So where can I find partner level case questions?
Yeah.
Would be
the question, simplified question. I'm going to ignore the books part.
Okay.
So partner cases, I get why he's asking that, because partner cases can be very different. So the thing is, when you get a consultant interviewing you, even a manager, they've learned how to interview in extensive company trainings, right? Partners have that so the managers and the consultants, they will use the firm's cases, they will use the firm's checklists and etc. Partners have had
also because not just because they had the trainings, but also because it's mandatory.
Yeah, of course.
They have to.
Yeah. But when you get to partners, partners are ruling the whole thing. So in a way, they're closer to being able to do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And they're also a lot more confident on their skills of testing candidates whichever way they want. So if your partner is interviewing you, you can be fairly certain that they can do whatever they want and they're going to test you even better than a consultant or a manager would. And they're confident of that too, so they can do anything they want in their cases. So sometimes they do. And when they do, the cases can vary a lot from what you're used to. The cases can be less structured. There can be a lot less guidance sometimes. The cases can be poorly scoped on purpose. Like the partner is not going to give a clear question, sometimes not a clear client, because they want to see how you will scope the problem, because that's something that they have to do often.
Yeah.
Right? So these cases are very different.
Can I give an example of poor scoping?
Yeah.
We had a client once who had a partner interview where she went into the interview and the partner was like chit-chatting, like, oh, I just got a flight here. Or she flew there and she was mentioning she just got a flight. I don't remember. But the partner said, hey, why do you think the leg room is getting so tight nowadays? And it sounded like chit chat, but then like 3 minutes in, she realized that was the case. And there's no like, the client wants this result. They're wondering whether they should do X or Y. It's just like, hey, why is leg room getting smaller? Like, kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then it evolved into a full-fledged case. So just one example of that.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing they can do. Now, don't take this as, this is what partners are going to do. The point is they can do anything they want, and poorly scoping a case is one of the ways that they will do that. And the problem with having such great variety, and also the problem with the other cases, the regular ones being so structured, is that no one makes these resources.
Right.
The resource that Christopher is looking for doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's a couple reasons for that. So in the books part, so he wanted a book. There's no book for that because the market is tiny.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense for someone to write a book for final round interviews. Like, so books tend to be towards beginners because that's where the majority of people are. Also, let's say you could build a partner case book, right? You could aggregate different interviews by different partners and make a case book out of that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't exist either, and I don't think it's possible that it exists in casebook format because partner interviews are highly unstructured, at least the ones that would be called partner interviews, right? Some partners use regular cases, but then normal preparation will
cover it.
Will cover it, yeah. But those different cases, which I guess is like 60 to 70% of final round cases, they're very unstructured. So you can't say, oh, there was this question asked this way, and then there was this question asked this way.
Right, which means they're
this follow-up question. It's more like a conversation, and sometimes you go like 15 minutes on your own and they don't say a word, and then they start heavily interfering and asking like 15 follow-up questions in a row.
Right, so they're interaction dependent.
Very interaction dependent, and yeah, I'd say that it's kind of like acting, right? If you're gonna act for an ad, like a TV ad, you can look at the script with like what's happening on the scene and get a good idea of what the ad looks like. But if you're acting for, I don't know, like a movie, like those like high culture movies, like high culture films with high level actors, like it's not the same as the script, right?
Yeah.
It's different.
Yeah.
And I don't know what I'm talking about. I've never been to a studio, but
yeah, so that's how partner cases are different, and that's why these resources don't exist. Now we made a few partner level drills for our advanced courses.
Right.
There are some in the master market sizing course
Yeah.
for estimations and market sizings.
And we even simulate the interaction.
Yeah, that's the whole point. In this course, and you can find one of them in our free course.
Yeah, in the estimations module, there's one which is exactly from the master market sizing.
Exactly, yeah. In that case, since the interaction was so important, we even recorded the cases together rather than in drills format like the others. Because you actually need that interaction to understand what a partner case is like, and even to practice. You need to come up with your answer, and then you need to see what the interviewer would challenge, so that you can work on that, and you can do that several times.
Yeah, and we also have that on structuring drills, not with the interaction yet, though we are going to make those, but we have brainstorming and framework prompts.
For super advanced cases.
Yeah, like complex cases in industries you've never heard about, and like weird questions like, oh, what are the barriers to entry in this market? Like things that you don't find on case books. Or like we have a deregulation case, so should a country deregulate a certain industry or it doesn't matter the type of case, but what matters is you'll find these prompts, and it doesn't simulate the whole interview, but it gets you much more prepared.
Yeah. So, and the reason we have those in those two courses is because they are more commonly used in estimations, frameworks, and brainstormings. The partners will vary more in those types of cases.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So what changes from a first round and a final round interview? I think there's a couple of things. The first one is what you just said. Let me go back a step. The first thing is they can do whatever they want, be unstructured, in the case, not that you can be unstructured when solving it, but be unstructured throughout the case. They can do it, not you. They can make the scope fuzzier. They can do whatever they want. The second thing is in the building blocks themselves, in the specific types of questions. Like a math question is going to be a math question.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter if it's a partner or not. Because they're going to give you some numbers and ask you to calculate something. A chart interpretation question, same thing. Like they give you a chart, maybe they'll give you 3 charts and make it harder, but it's still charts, right? And you're just going to have to take away the insights from the charts, right? Hypothesis testing, same thing. They're going to ask you, hey, how would you test this hypothesis that I created or that you just said? It doesn't matter. And you create a test for it. And maybe they will push you harder than in the first round and make you be more rigorous or thinking of alternative ways to test it. But it's still the same type of question, right?
Yeah.
The same question, essentially. Like it's just they're pushing you harder. Now, for estimations, brainstormings, and frameworks, that's where they get more creative, right? So in the first round, they might have a regular question, even if it's a public sector question that's slightly non-traditional, they're going to ask you a normal question like, hey, how should this country improve the math scores of their high school students?
Yeah.
Right? Now, a partner might do a question that's way more specific, complex, and unscoped. Let me try to create one on the spot. So, how should this country influence the teachers' union to make them teach math better?
Yeah.
So it's way harder, right? And it's like, what do you mean by influence? Like, how's the teachers' union in this country?
Yeah. What are the incentives of the government and the union and the teachers?
What
and the
do you mean by
schools?
country? Like, there isn't an entity called country influencing a union, right? Is it the president? Is it the Ministry of Education? I don't know. So they tend to be more creative, more unscoped on that. Same for brainstorming. Instead of like, hey, what do you think are the costs in this industry, which is very common in the first round. In the final round, it's more like, what do you think is the future of this industry given the trend of virtual reality or whatever? So it's more like, what should I do with this?
Yeah.
And estimations is the same. Instead of like size this market, it's going to be like, it might be something like how many... there was this estimation question they used at McKinsey here in Brazil, which is like, how many cops do you need to patrol a city of a certain size so that they pass through every street every 8 minutes or something?
I think that the question is, how many cops do you need? How many cop cars or whatever do you need? So that every time, if you look out the window, you'll see one at least every 5 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So way harder, right? It's not like, I just need to get the population and see the percentage that buy this product. It's like you need to take into account the geography of the city and these are harder. So
Yeah.
if you focus on harder, poorly scoped, different, odd structuring and estimation questions, you do like 95% of the work you need to be prepared for these types of questions. So you just need to focus on these 3 building blocks. You can find that in our advanced courses, or you can look for them elsewhere. I don't know where, but
Yeah.
and I'd say, let me add something. There's 3 things that you should focus on for partner interviews, not the building blocks specifically, but things that they will do differently with you. And if you're prepared for these 3 scenarios or skills, you'll do better. The first one, and I brought this here because
Yeah.
the first one is using assumptions more freely. So in a first round, you have to be way more data driven.
Yeah.
So you can use assumptions, but you have to validate them a lot. And in a partner round, you have to feel the interview, right? Sometimes they want you to be extremely data driven.
Yeah.
But sometimes they'll just say, hey, what do you think this number is? Or what do you think this scenario is? It can be qualitative assumptions as well. What do you think the scenario is in this industry? And then you say an assumption, and they'll say, okay, run with that. And then they'll ask you to do another assumption and another assumption. And you're building a whole argument on assumptions on top of assumptions. And obviously, that's not rigorous problem solving.
Yeah.
But it's excellent for creating hypotheses that are more complex than ones you'd create normally. Now, the second thing, prioritizing branches better. And this comes with the assumptions. So let's say you open up an issue tree. If you, in a normal first round, you have to be selective through data to cut off branches of the issue tree, right? But in a partner round, sometimes you have to do that as well. But sometimes they'll ask you to prioritize.
Yeah.
On assumptions, like you have to use your own assumptions to prioritize. And when you mix together prioritizing branches with giving assumptions to things, you start to be able to, without any data, get into the probable, and this is the key word, probable, to the probable root of the problem.
So just one caveat that I would make in this situation is, yes, use your assumptions more freely. Yes, prioritize, of course, using assumptions, because prioritizing is a way of using assumptions, but do that explicitly. So always say, so I'm making this assumption over here. So you're not making a logic jump that the partner won't understand. You're making an assumption, and when you make the assumption explicit, you're also giving them something to challenge. Rather than saying that doesn't make sense, that thing that you just said doesn't make sense, they can say, so I don't necessarily agree with that assumption.
Yeah, that's a good point. So every assumption in consulting has to be 100% explicit. Otherwise, it reinforces the stereotype of consultants saying things out of their mind, and that's not what happens in reality. But some clients have this thing, and if you want rigorous problem solving, you can have tons of assumptions as long as you know they're all assumptions so that you test them eventually.
Yeah.
If they would break the argument if wrong. So that's a good point. You shouldn't use more assumptions just because you're in a partner interview, but you should be able to. And if you feel that's where they're going with the interview, so that you have the ability to do so, and you also need to be extremely explicit about it,
Yeah.
right? And I had a third thing here, which is practicing deriving second order consequences from facts.
Okay.
Okay, so let me give you an example. In the case that I just mentioned, like, why is legroom getting smaller and smaller, right? A good candidate would derive a first order consequence. And obviously you need a structured way to present that and everything, but I'm just going to jump through to the conclusions. The first order consequence of that could be, well, you can fit more people on the same plane.
Yeah.
And the costs are mostly associated with the flight itself, not with the number of people in the plane. So you have a better profit per passenger.
Okay.
Right? So you improve the profitability of the airline. That's the first order consequence of that. Now, there's a second order consequence, which is, if my competitor does that, they get more profitable, but they can also drop prices more than I can to fill up a plane that wouldn't be full otherwise.
Yeah.
Right? So that's a second order consequence. And then a third order consequence, which is a consequence that derives from this fact, is if they can do that, my flights are going to be even less full.
Yeah.
Because let's say two flights compete for the same route, ours and theirs. They have, let's say we each have like our planes at 70% capacity on average. Now they drop their prices to raise their capacity to 90%. Now ours is on 50%.
Yeah.
Right? So if that happens, we become unprofitable as a company.
Yeah.
Which means, fourth order consequence, that we also need to diminish the legroom.
Right.
Even though we want to position ourselves as premium or whatever. And that is the explanation why pretty much every airline is doing that.
Yeah.
So this is not easy to do, right? And there are assumptions here, of course. Like we're assuming that consumers are price sensitive. And they'll go to the flights that's cheaper despite lower legroom. And that's a fair assumption. Like we all know the airline market. We know that people complain about the legroom, but then they get the cheaper flight, right? There's also, there's tons of assumptions built up here. But if these assumptions are true, then this is what's going to happen to the industry. And partners specifically are looking for that. If you can show that in the first round, that's great. But if you can't show that in a final round, that's often reason to be rejected.
When that's something required. When that's something that the case requires. Right?
Yeah, but almost every case that they do requires this, especially the odd ones.
Okay, yeah. The odd ones, I can go for it. Yeah.
Like some partners may care less about it. Some partners may care more about it. But the thing is that their cases are so unstructured that if they want to test it, they can plug into the case, right? They can.
Yeah. So I guess what second order effects mean is a consequence of a consequence.
Yeah.
And then a consequence of that.
Right. It could be an externality. There are some types of second order consequences. It could be an externality. It could be an after effect. It could be a changing behavior given what you do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next question.
All right.
So that is a question from actually almost everyone.
Okay.
Lots of people send us these questions, this specific one. So basically, the question is, can I mix in my framework a conceptual framework and a profit tree? So basically what they're saying is, can I make a framework that says something like, I'm going to analyze the competition, the consumers, the company that I have, and I'm going to make a profit tree to see the profitability, or to see if this is going to be profitable, or to see where the profit problem is, or whatever.
Okay, good. So, agree. This question comes up almost every week.
Yeah, they ask about it because it seems unmessy, it seems unparalleled, but if you don't do that, it feels like you're missing something.
Yeah.
If you're doing a profit tree, it seems like you're not talking about the consumers and the competition. And if you're only talking about the 3 C's, as some people say it, then you're not looking at the profits, which are the ultimate goal.
Yeah. So let me give viewers more context, or listeners, because some people may not know what we're talking about, especially those who haven't gone through the free course yet. So what we teach people is that there are 2 ways to structure a framework. You either use an issue tree or a logic tree, which can often be a profit tree, right? But it's more quantitative in nature, more logical. It has several layers.
Yeah.
Or you use a conceptual framework, what many people call a bucket framework. So you have buckets, and it's usually qualitative. So you have the 3 C's: customer, competition, company, but you may also add other buckets like distributors, regulators, I don't know, the environment, things like that. And we teach exactly how to build good conceptual frameworks from scratch in the free course through what we call the landscape technique. Now, what we tell people in that course is don't ever mix those, because it becomes unmessy. And that's counterintuitive, because a lot of people say, well, isn't it more messy if I have like all the players and all the buckets of things that matter, and then I also add like the profitability at the end? And the answer is no.
Why?
Because let me give you an example. Let's say I want to see if I want to enter a market or not. Okay, so I sell glasses.
Okay.
Should I enter the Argentinian market? Okay, one way to see that is, will I be profitable in the Argentinian market? Actually, let me start with the other one first. One way of seeing this is through a conceptual qualitative lens. Is there demand in the Argentinian market? And how is this demand? This is the customer's bucket.
Okay.
How is the competition there? Like, who else sells glasses? How are they doing? How aggressive they are? What are the profit margins? Blah, blah, blah. You could have a company bucket. Like, is my company positioned to succeed in the Argentinian market? So what are the products that we have? How is our production capacity? Can we get our products to Argentina well? Do we have wine glasses? I don't know. Maybe that's important in Argentina. It sounds like it. And then you can have other buckets like how's the distribution of glasses there? Like, do people buy glasses in e-commerce stores? Can we get into those? And so on, right?
Yeah.
So that's one lens through which you can see that problem. And this is a simple conceptual framework. You could also have a more complicated, more not complicated, but a more advanced objective-driven framework, which is like, instead of talking about players, you talk about market attractiveness, competitive advantages, barriers to distribute, things like that. Okay? And I'm not going to get into how to build those. We teach that in our advanced structuring course. Okay. But it takes a while to get there. So that's one lens, right? You're talking about qualitative stuff. And within that, you're obviously going to ask for numbers. Yeah. Right? You're not just going to talk qualitative. It's just the structure is qualitative first. The way it's structured is through qualitative slices of the problem. Yeah. And then you have qualitative and quantitative information in each bucket. Now, the other way to structure this would be, let's assume they just want to be profitable. In a certain time frame. You can ask about the time frame. Right. Now I'm going to build a profit tree to see what are their revenues going to look like? What are their costs going to look like? For revenues, you can split into number of glasses sold times average price. For costs, you can add up all the costs to produce and distribute these glasses and sell, and etc. Now, you don't have all the numbers, because if you had them, the client wouldn't have the question, right? Yeah. It's silly. Like, and if they're thinking about their profits in 10 years, then you can't have all the numbers because you need a crystal ball to do that. Yeah. So how do you solve this case through a quantitative perspective? You need to gather both quantitative and qualitative data to assume the numbers that go into each small part of your framework and eventually calculate, for example, the potential profit.
Yeah.
Right? So if you see, like, what are the questions that you'd ask here? It's current profitability. Well, but we're not in the market yet. Well, then we can maybe use our competitors' profitabilities or our competitors' prices. Well, but our glasses are better than our competitors. Okay, so we have this qualitative information that our glasses are better, so we can use the competitors' prices and add 10%, 20%. I don't know how much. How do you figure this number out? Well, you can ask about the difference between our glasses and our competitors' glasses prices in other markets. And then you have a good assumption for that information. So you can solve the case this way, but the questions that you're asking are exactly the same as the questions you're asking in the conceptual framework, right? And because of that, it's uneasy to use both. Because you're asking the same questions twice and in a redundant way. It's okay to ask the same question twice when the situation is different. But in this case, it's the same situation. You're just looking at the same problem from two different angles.
Yeah.
But all the roads lead to Rome, right? You can use either approach to get to the problem. So that's why we teach them never to mix it up. Because what a lot of people do, and what I'm going to say next is that you can mix them up in a very special situation and way. But what a lot of people do is they say, well, I built this conceptual framework here, but now it's missing the profits. And it's important to know the profits, right? Well, yes, but you are going to get all the information to know if it's going to be highly profitable or not.
Yeah.
But what a lot of people do, because they feel the profits are missing, is that they'll get their company bucket and then pull out like a little line here and say, well, profits, because profits are in the company. And then they'll build a full-fledged profit tree here.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work, first because it's redundant, as I said, and second because like market share is one component of profit. It's a component of revenue, which is a component of profit. And your market share depends not only on your company, it also depends on your competitors and your customers. Yeah. What they want and, you know, how the market is structured. Yeah. And same thing, like your average price. It's not, I mean, it is your decision to make, but to determine the price, if you're smart about it, you're not only just, you know, giving a price, you're taking into account your competitors' prices and your and your demand price sensitivity. Yeah. So all of these things are not part of the company. Even though the profits are gonna flow into the company, they're not
fully determined by the company.
Exactly. Right? Because if the company could fully determine the profits, then they wouldn't need a consulting firm. So that's one way people do it. And the other way people do it, which is wrong, is they'll have the qualitative framework and then they'll have a final bucket called profit. Yeah. And then they'll ask the same questions all over again. But they don't notice that because they don't ask exactly the same questions. They ask about the same concepts or things that depend on those concepts without making it explicit that if you go through your qualitative framework, you already have like 90% of the information. So how can you do it? And I'm not saying that you should do it.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you, most people who ask this question, they feel like when they make a conceptual structure, they're lacking a path to the answer. Right. They feel like, okay, I'm going to ask a bunch of stuff, I'm going to know a bunch of stuff, but it's not clear how I'm going to turn that into an answer. And so that's why they kind of want to make a profit bucket.
Because if you know the profit, it's easier to give an answer, right?
Exactly, yeah. You'll say, oh, this is going to be profitable, so let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. So 3 scenarios. Actually, 2 situations. First is, do you need to have both? Most times you don't. Because, for example, if the company wants to know if they should export glasses to Argentina, and it's a very short thing, they don't care about that market a lot. They just want to know if they're going to be profitable from year 1. Then you can estimate profits on year 1 and give them an answer. and thus you can use a fully quantitative framework. Maybe you add a qualitative thing or two,
Yeah.
like, oh, how can we operate this? And maybe that's necessary or not, depending on the question. But because it's 1 year off and it's not a strategic decision,
Yeah.
like if it goes wrong, there's no huge deal. You can use numbers from the current market.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, you could say, well, if you can build the tree and determine that if you get 10% market share, you'll be profitable, and you've never not gotten 10% market share in any market you entered.
Yeah.
And by the way, you also entered Uruguay, Chile, and Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
So you know those markets. Then you can recommend based on the quantitative alone. Now, if this company cares more about their 30-year vision,
Mm-hmm.
like which markets should they be, and is Argentina one of them?
Yeah.
In 30 years, like there's no point in making a profit tree because I don't know, maybe everyone's in the metaverse and no one's drinking from glasses anymore. Just kidding, but like it's much more important to know the qualitative things, like even like how is the government there, like where's their economy going.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you should focus the case there, but the profit tree becomes irrelevant. Now there's a sweet spot in the middle where you need both the quantitative and the qualitative. That could be time wise, like, oh, it's 5 years off, or it could be depending on the goals of the management of the company. So like they want to enter just markets that are very promising in the future, but also that they make money from year one.
Yeah.
Or it could depend, if it were a different case, it could depend on the amount and confidence of the data that you have, right? So some markets have more, they're more stable, so you can project the data more into the future and so on. So in those scenarios where you want to use both, what you can do is say, you build them sequentially instead of putting them all into one framework. So basically you have two frameworks and they're sequential. You have one qualitative framework that's conceptual.
Yeah.
And you understand if this market is attractive in a qualitative, conceptual manner, looking at all players and all sides of the market and evaluating that information qualitatively with numbers in it as well, but more from a qualitative side. And then you add a last bucket, which is like estimation of profit. And you tell the interviewer, hey, I'm going to understand this whole market first. And once I have all of this, I'm going to use this information that I got here and try to consolidate it into an estimation of profit. Yeah. So you're not saying, hey, I'm asking all these questions and then I'm going to have to ask all the questions again so I can estimate profit. You're saying, this is a last step just to consolidate the information in a way that we can have a more assertive answer because we're working with that data and some other data that we might get here to have an answer. So
by the way, most times you're not going to have to do the estimation of profit.
Yeah.
The interviewer is not going to get all the way there. They just want to know how you would solve the problem, what you would want to understand about that market. Now, you talked a lot about the conceptual structures and what goes inside, what doesn't, looking at a problem from all sides. And we're not going to teach you how to do that here. We're not going to teach the listener. But if they do want to learn how to build conceptual structures, they can go to our free course. It's thoroughly explained there.
Yeah.
And it's long and it's hard, and that's why it's not going to be in the answer to this question.
Yeah, and we don't teach there how to mix these two. And the reason we don't do that is very important. It was very deliberate. It's not for the beginners.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not for the intermediates as well. Because the risk is too high. If you don't communicate explicitly well that, hey, I have this bucket, but I'm aware that all things are covered here, and this is just a consolidation thing, and maybe we don't need to use it, and etc. If you don't communicate it very well, your interviewer might reject you because you were not Missy. And that's a big problem, right? So we don't teach people to do that until they're prepared for it because it's highly risky. So that's an important thing to add.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Do we have any questions left?
No, those are all for today.
All right. So thank you for this episode. I'll see you in the next one.
Sounds good, Julio.